great. The blog was called Listen. Is it Listen, Listen,
Yeah.
Listen? Or
Yeah.
yeah. And it was a conversation basically because you've had some on the face of them quite controversial song titles, band titles, lyrics,
when
etc.
I think I have not been held to account, honestly, for how deaf I was to feminism and how I was enjoying the privilege of being a straight dude, and my peers and my friend circle, my circle of friends and my peers were mostly dudes, and mostly sort of objectifying women to a degree. And it's been a long process of me coming to grips with my complicity in that and trying to make amends to the extent I can, and trying to, at a minimum, appreciate that I was wrong about those things and that I should own up to it. I don't feel like I have been properly held to account, for example, for some of the sexist things that I've written and said, and for naming a band Rapeman, for example. I mean, that's,
For instance,
face inexcusable, but at the time I was able to remove myself from that insult because I was able to convince myself that I was generally a good and progressive person, and so that shouldn't matter.
right?
And that's another aspect of privilege that I was enjoying, that I was allowed to think that about myself,
Right. Well, it's a fascinating conversation. I recommend everybody read it because it's. I mean, all of this is just the tip of the iceberg, especially with everything that's going on now and having attention called to it, very rightly so. But it's a great way in, I think, because everybody's very focused on. Oh, sorry.
Dan, I'm sorry, I'm doing a podcast at the moment. I'm going to need to call you back. Is that all right? What's your podcast called, Andrew?
It's called Andrew Talks to Awesome People.
It's called Andrew Talks to Awesome People.
I had like minutes to come up with that.
Clearly sarcastic. Okay, is tonight all right? All right, I'll call you back tonight. But sorry about that.
That's all right. I was just going on and on and on about the basic. I think my only point was that I think there's some of the sexism that is not getting talked about as much as it was right before we all realized we have to talk about racism as well. But it is the same issue. It's exactly the same.
What we're talking about are intrinsic and enforced power structures that people like you and I can unconsciously enjoy and feel like we are not participating in, but through our unconscious participation, we perpetuate them. And I do what I can to be aware of those power structures and those things now, and I can only be embarrassed by how ignorant and how willfully ignorant and how like sort of indulgent I was when I had the luxury of thinking those things were unimportant.
Right, but I think it's also, there are times when people are sort of held to account forever for something, and obviously if you've done something horrible, well, there's a lot more accounting to be held to for that. But I can't remember who this was. But there's someone being interviewed about this and had done something like that, like said something in the past, and he said, look, would you rather that I didn't change? I am not disowning what I said it, and that gives me even more impetus to now try and do what I'm doing. And what they were trying to do was to do what was right. So it's the fact that you recognize it.
That's painted in the noblest terms, but it's not other people's job to redeem you if you've done something awful. it's your job to redeem yourself. And like
Or
I said,
pay a priest to do it.
yeah. I mean, I feel like anyone that bristles at having their own behavior brought up to them as though it's somehow unfair is perpetuating the system by refusing to account for it.
Yeah.
Perpetuating the imbalance of power by refusing to account for it. And I'm willing to be uncomfortable for however long it takes for me to articulate that I was passively enjoying that privilege during that period, and I'm ashamed of it. I don't think that absolves me of having been unmentionable, and I don't think it's out of line for other people to point out that I've been grotesque in the past. I think it's an opportunity for me to learn. And as I mentioned to Evelyn, for me to listen. And I think that's, I think that's an adult responsibility.
Yeah.
That anyone who bristles at being held to account for something they did or said is denying culpability, as
Yes.
opposed,
Exactly.
what they're really saying is, can't we just move on?
Yeah.
Can't I just not be made to answer for this? Can't you just be nicer to me than I was to the world? So I'm aware of things that I've said and done that are abhorrent, and I'm repulsed by them as well now, because I have been made aware of the context, and I've been made aware of the overarching theme that I was being a part of.
Yeah.
When at the time I had the luxury of feigning ignorance,
Yeah. And I think as white men, especially sort of Western Hemisphere white men, we have the easiest time ignoring it and the hardest time owning it.
It's so easy to find other people who will let you off the hook.
Yeah.
It's almost that there's a cottage industry in letting us off the hook for all the awful things that we've done.
Yeah.
So the least I can do is, if somebody wants to yell at me about something, the least I can do is listen to them and let them yell at me, because they're not doing it for no reason,
Yeah. And I think anyone having trouble with the concept, there's a book called White Fragility. And just